Hello and welcome to the Comic Book Book Club, the #1 podcast amongst those that regularly fail the Bechdel test. I'm your host, Matt Lasik, and I know a lot about comic books.
I'm your co-host, Kendra Forte, and I know nothing about comic books.
And right off the bat, I apologize for the recurring audio issue. We are aware of it. We are just not aware of how to fix it. So I'll do my best to speak clearly to try and overcome the scratchiness of my audio. But there's just nothing that we can do at the moment. So, we...
You couldn't see it, but I made a face.
Kendra did not like that, ladies and gentlemen. All right, you want to just jump into this?
Let's do it.
We are doing Loki, Agent of Asgard, written by Al Ewing, who is considered to be like one of, if not the best comic book writer currently in the market. The most recent notable thing he's done is he sort of relaunched the Hulk brand with the now famous Immortal Hulk series. I think it won some awards at some point, but he's one of my favorite writers. And I know I say that a lot. I have a lot of favorite writers, okay? But Al Ewing really is in the top 3. Yeah, we did a lot of background information in last week's episode, or I guess I did, that we're not really going to jump into now, so I guess here's your warning that this could very well be incredibly confusing if you are just hopping into this episode.
I went back and listened to it. You did a solid 11 minutes out of an hour podcast of background information. So if you want to run and listen to that on 2 times speed and come back... We'll be here.
Yeah, it is all very vital information though, because this comic wastes no time explaining it except in very, very brief flashbacks. It expects you to know it, which I guess is endemic of most superhero comics. It just expects you to know things. But at least with this one, the stuff that it expects you to know is pretty recent history and not something that happened in one issue in the 70s. You know?
I mean, I'll get to it when it pops up, but
okay, yeah, we'll. Right. Let's just jump into it, right? Today we're aiming to get through the first 6 issues. There's 17 in total in this run, so we're trying to do 665 or 656, however it ends up. Today our goal is 6 issues. So with that, let's jump into issue 1. It starts in media res, which is one of my favorite phrases to use to prove that I know words. It starts in media res with Loki stabbing Thor in the back with a glowing sword. Yay! And then it cuts to the now familiar recap page, where it is just text recapping what happened before this. Brief tangent. This is one of the things let me rephrase that. This is one of the things that I think Marvel does better than DC, in that most Marvel comics will have a recap page like this, or at least a recap paragraph. DC doesn't do that. So it's helpful for me, who reads, almost every comic that comes out every week, to be what the hell happened 2 weeks ago? Oh yeah, here's a friendly recap paragraph. Thanks, Marvel. And then it's DC, it's well, I guess I'll just have to figure it out through context clues, especially since my memory isn't the best. So me likey recap. Right. We then have a flashback. There's a lot of those in this series. Lots of flashbacks and then flashbacks within flashbacks. So this is our first.
It's giving big, hi, my name is Loki, and my life is kind of crazy vibes.
Now I know what you're thinking. How did I end up here?
Record scratch.
Yeah, anyways. So earlier... Loki is in the shower singing a song from Wicked. Did you know that the song was from Wicked?
I think I accidentally skipped the first 3 pages of this comic, because the first thing that I remember is your 3rd note.
Dang, rip. Anyways, Loki's in the shower. He's singing Wicked. He is contacted by the All-Mother, who is a ruling triumvirate of goddesses, namely Frigga, Gaia, and Idun, who are who are serving they're ruling over Asgard, or I guess at this point it would be Asgardia, because at this point in time Odin is off in exile somewhere. So he's contacted by the Allmother, who send him on a mission to Avengers Tower. And this starts one of this comic's big... it launches into a big caption text sequence. This comic is heavy with caption texts, but unlike Crisis, where it was just repetitive and boring and kind of burdened the comic, because Al Ewing is writing this,
this was fun to read.
The captions are some of the best part of this comic. So this scene sets up two things that is important to the comic. The first is just, the presence of caption boxes. And the second is a focus on the power of stories. As Loki is climbing the side of Avengers Tower on magic boots, he gives a narration about how he uses magic and how, in essence, magic is telling reality a story so convincing that, quote, the world believes a man can fly. So there's a lot of talk about stories and magic and the relationship within the two in this comics. This is the first hint of that. So he sneaks into the tower. He sees Thor drinking, which is normal for Thor, but being uncharacteristically mean. Thor sniffs him out, literally, because I guess that's a power Thor has, is to smell Loki. Sure.
Are you telling me you can't smell your sister?
No. I'm going to say no. At least not from, across a room like Thor is doing here. Anyways, he punches Loki out the window. He falls past Widow and Hawkeye, the latter of which save him with a grappling hook arrow. During this, as he's falling and grabbing onto the grappling hook and everything, Loki explains that why he doesn't just magic himself out of every scenario, primarily because it just wouldn't make for a good story, and also because if he uses too much magic, he'll spend eternity in chains burning forever. So that's fun. That's another thing that pops up a lot, is Loki spending eternity in chains burning forever. He talks about it.
Yes, he is very obsessed with the idea of not wanting to be...
burning in chains forever.
So
Hawkeye pulls him back into the tower, and then we get a brief flashback to Avengers issue 1, in which old Loki was all evil and what have you.
Everyone here looks gross.
Yeah. We're probably going to do OG Avengers someday.
This is making me very much not want to.
Yeah. Costume designs were not a thing back then. This is where Hawkeye calls Loki One Direction-y, which is my
hilarious.
Favorite. It's my favorite way to refer to new merged Loki is as One Direction Loki.
And I didn't realize I agreed until he said it, and I was like, that's what he looks like.
Yeah.
It's cute.
It's very cute. Loki's very cute in this.
Loki is so cute in this. I enjoy Loki a lot in this.
So at this point, the rest of the Avengers show up. Loki manages to, misdirection-y. He manages to get them all angry at each other so that he can kind of slip out of the room while they're all getting all punchy. He then sneaks over to the Avengers' database and uses it to purge all of the records, and more importantly, all of the stories of old Loki from all of the world's databases. Which was his mission, maybe not the Allmother's mission, but that was his mission for getting into Avengers Tower. At this point, the Avengers find him, and Thor attacks, intending to kill him, which is very not heroic of him.
Is that why the hammer...
Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought.
He's unable to carry Mjolnir because of the whole enchantment about being worthy and whatever. And then Loki stabs him, like we saw on the first page.
Ooh.
So, after Loki stabs him, this, thick black smoke comes billowing out of his orifices. And we get a flashback to Thor, who had been acting more and more... what's a term that I can use on the radio to describe this? Rude? Rude's kind of kind of too light to describe. We're just gonna go with rude. He'd been acting more and more rude until the Allmother had noticed and summarily sent Loki to steal Graham, which is a magical sword that used to be wielded by Sigurd, the first hero of Asgard, and is enchanted with some sort of truth magic. Supposedly, if you are hit with the blade, you're forced to, be confronted with your innermost truth of yourself or whatever. So, Loki stabbing Thor with Graham purges this corruptive magic out of him, and Loki collects the smoke in a cute little magic jar, and then gets punched in the face by the Hulk. Sometime later, Loki ends up in a cell with Thor. They reconcile and bond a little bit as brothers, and it's very cute and endearing. And then after his inevitable escape, Loki hands over the magic jar full of black gunk to the All-Mother. And it's at this point where we learn Loki's primary motivation for running these missions for the All-Mother. For every mission he completes, the story of that mission replaces an ancient story of one of old Loki's crime from Asgard's memory. So he's trying to literally turn over a new leaf by erasing his past misdeeds from Asgard's cultural memory. Again, because stories are important. And then right as Loki leaves, the All-Mother opens the jar full of evilness, and it coalesces into the form of Old Loki. Dun, dun, dun. And that's issue 1. Any thoughts at this point?
Why? Okay. So at this point, we know Ecole?
Icol. I think
Icol. We know
right.
Icol has taken over the body of Kid Loki and aged him up, yeah?
Yeah,
and that's who we're following now, right?
Right. And the aging process, I think, also helped to sort of mix their essences together a little bit. Like, the memories of the Loki we're following are still that of Icol, who was like an echo of old Loki, but the personality seems more aligned with that of Kid Loki.
Okay, because I was wondering why old Loki would bother trying to turn over a new leaf.
Right. Yeah, because this Loki, who I've been referring to as New Loki, very clearly, like, what he did subsuming Kid Loki is still a secret, and he doesn't want to get out, and he seems to be, like, pretty genuine about trying to, like, become a better person, although maybe that's just because he doesn't want to spend eternity burning in chains. Who can really tell? And you know, this is a character that's sort of been passed around from writer to writer, so that does have a hand in what like how he acts and what his motivations are, certainly. But there's a certain panel, like, from Young Avengers of when Kid Loki with Icol inside of him got aged up, and it was like, it showed, like, a bunch of different, like, basically pictures of different versions of Loki being, like, merged together into this newer, aged-up form. So that's where I get the impression that New Loki is supposed to be, like, a merging of stories, you know?
Okay, cool.
So, issue 2. This is a very fun one. It starts with speed dating. We are viewing this through the point of view of a woman whose name we don't know yet, but who seems to be able to see through the lies of every man that, like, sits down to talk to her and just, like, immediately sends them away. Which, what a useful, like, superpower that would be, to just know when someone's lying to you.
I don't want it. I do not want it. If you're lying to me, you're lying to me. That's just what it is.
You'd rather have, like, blissful ignorance?
Yes, I'm sure most people aren't lying to me to make my life worse. So if you're lying to me, then
just keep doing it.
Yeah, I don't want to know the truth.
For Kendra's sake.
Yeah.
Anyways, this little cute montage of her being like, get lost, ends with Loki sitting down in front of her. And she's immediately like, why are you dressed like that? Freak?
Creep.
Yeah. And Loki's like, okay, I get what's going on here. Well, I might as well tell you my story then. Loki tells her that he is looking for an Asgardian named Lorelei, who is the younger sister of Amora, a.k.a. the Enchantress. The Enchantress is like a fairly major Thor villain, but she's never been in the MCU, I don't think.
Okay.
So no one knows about her.
Okay. I was like, I don't know who that is.
Do you remember Scourge, the bald guy from Ragnarok, with the guns and everything?
Yes.
He most traditionally is like her kind of sidekick / companion. The Enchantress's whole MO is like trying to, well, it used to be like trying to magic Thor into falling in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is that character's younger sister, Lorelei, who also, who is an ex-girlfriend to both Thor and Loki. So that's fun.
Homie hopper.
I've never heard that before.
Oh, it's my favorite term.
Yeah. So Lorelei had managed to remove herself from the Ragnarok reincarnation cycle, the same cycle that birthed Kid Loki, which in turn sort of removed her from Heimdall's gaze. Heimdall being the...
Heimdall.
Like the
if you don't know Heimdall, then...
I mean, he's played by Idris Elba, who's like one of the hottest men alive. So
yeah,
if you don't
if you don't know who he is, then that's...
Yeah.
Is this the podcast for you, really?
What do you mean?
Like, if you don't know who Heimdall is, is this really the podcast for you?
Yeah. For those of you who aren't aware, Heimdall is sort of the watchdog of Asgard, and he has the ability to, like, see everything. But he has to, like, be actually looking at something to see it. But if he wants to, he can see anything. Except for people like Lorelei, who had taken themselves out of the Ragnarok cycle. So 3 weeks prior to this little speed dating thing, the All-Mother had instructed Loki to find all of the Asgardians that had removed themselves from the cycle that were wandering Earth and bring them back to Asgardia, starting with Lorelei. And during this, we get a very brief flashback to the scene of Ikal annihilating and subsuming Kid Loki. And it's real freaky. It's real spooky, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, this is the one thing that they kind of went back and explained. This is where I realized that I was missing information and had to go back and listen to the podcast.
Right. So Loki easily finds Lorelei, who's been running heists, basically. And if you know me, you know I love a good heist.
We love a good heist here.
We love a good heist. We see one such heist, which involves mixing, like, you know, Ocean's 11-esque exploits with Asgardian magic. And some of the magic seems to be faulty, as it's eventually revealed that Loki had shapeshifted to infiltrate Lorelei's crew and manipulated events so that just the two of them would get locked in a vault together. And this is also a moment where we get some more sort of indirect confirmation that Loki is gender fluid, because he had taken on like a female presenting form to infiltrate the crew, but he tells the truth-seeing woman at the speed dating event that no matter what shape he takes, he's quote always myself.
Himself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just, I don't know. This is the kind of stuff that I like to see, where it's like, you know, queer representation without it being overt and, you know, overpowering, I guess. Like where it's just like a part of their character, but not like the main part of their character. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Lorelei had managed to teleport out of this vault, so Loki said, "Oh well, went in Monte Carlo," and then just stole the cash that they were going for and dipped himself. Back in the present, Loki reveals he's at the speed dating event because that's where Lorelei goes to rebuild her cash reserves after a heist gone wrong by enchanting men who go to speed dating events.
Give them their wallet.
Yeah, the camera just cuts over to Lorelei being like one table over and stealing a man's wallet. Also, Loki is supposed to be wearing an illusion of a 40-year-old man, yet this random woman saw through it. So that explains why everyone in the bar isn't like, "Hey, isn't that Loki over there?" We then learn a little bit more about this woman, who is named Verity Willis. Verity has been able to see through any lie told to her for as long as she can remember, including like she can't even like suspend her disbelief to get involved in a fictional story, which would suck. If like the truth telling power was like that severe, I wouldn't want that.
No, it's a terrible power. Also, Verity is kind of on the nose because Veritas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Means truth.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's comic books. You got characters named Reed Richards and Peter Parker. I don't know what you want. This is the same comic book in which later a man named Victor Von Doom appears. I don't know.
It's just they were trying to be. They tried for this one, and it just did not work out.
I mean, if they did, it was only like a marginal more effort than they usually do. Like if you're looking for subtlety in naming conventions, comic books are not the place to go. Anyways, after hearing Verity's story, Loki gets up because Lorelei is leaving the bar. They meet up outside, and Loki reveals that he hasn't been following her to complete the All-Mother's mission, but instead because he's putting together a crew of his own for some vague mission.
Ooh.
Intrigue. And then there's a cute little moment right at the end where Lorelei's something like, oh, but you were like making moony eyes at that woman in the bar, and he's like, oh, what woman? I've already forgotten about her. And Verity, who's like listening in from the corner, goes, liar. And it's very cute. Yeah.
Issue 3.
Yeah. Moving on to issue 3. I really like this issue. We'll get into why. It's just very, it's like a whole separate thing from like the main storyline. Like it's just a quick little detour for one issue.
Which is why I did like it, because I have baby brain. And if the main story go bye-bye, I forget main story exists.
Well, that's why a recap page exists. Right, issue 3. While all of this meet cute stuff is happening in the bar, in a cell in the pits of Asgardia, old Loki is watching new Loki's antics. He escapes his cell by just walking outside of the panels of the comic book, which is like I love it when comic book characters do that. There's a lot of that with the character Gwenpool, whose whole like powers come from the fact that she was like born in quote unquote our universe and then transported to the Marvel universe, so she can just like abuse the fact that she's in a comic book by like walking through panels and stuff. So I love it when like not only because it's further than just like characters like Deadpool acknowledging that they're in a comic. It's when characters like abuse that fact by like manipulating the physics of the world via the fact that they're in a comic, you know?
That reminds me, we have to watch Doom Patrol.
Do they do that in Doom Patrol?
They do that in Doom Patrol.
I guess we gotta watch Doom Patrol. Anyways, so old Loki walks out of his cell through the panels of the comic and travels to the past, which he can do now because new Loki's efforts to change his past has left the story of Loki in a state of flux, which like makes cracks that old Loki can slip through into the past. Or, if you don't want to think about that too much, you can just tell yourself that old Loki can time travel because it's a superpower he has. And that makes things so much simpler. So, in the past, old Loki encounters and befriends a young Prince Odin. Little baby Odin, which is not a thing that we see very often.
Little Goldilocks looking...
little freak. So, old Loki and Prince Odin go on their way, and they encounter a friendly giant otter, who old Loki immediately kills and skins. Kendra looks distraught.
Because, Prince Odin has got some problems going on, and he sees this decrepit creature, and it's like, you know what? That's a friend. And then they find a magical otter, and this once again decrepit creature just says yeet to its life.
Yeah.
And Prince Odin continues with this
decrepit creature.
I was trying to find another word. But I couldn't. Because
every time that, like, Odin watches old Loki do something messed up, he's like, why did you do that? He's like, ooh, I'm just a little trickster. It's the mischief in me, Prince Odin. Aren't I so precocious? Anyways.
This is... I'm going to look up synonyms for decrepit creature.
So that night, they spend the night in the inn of Hreidmar, who is a Vanir. And this whole thing is getting into, like, the intricacies of Norse mythology. Basically, all you need to know is that the Asgardians that lived in Asgard were, like, the top gods, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the Vanir from Vanaheim, I think, isn't Vanaheim a place in, like, California?
No, that's Anaheim.
Okay, cool. Vanaheim is home to the Vanir, who are, like, somewhat lesser, like, more nature-inclined gods.
Okay.
So they come across an inn staffed by Hreidmar, one of the Vanir, and his 3 sons. While they're having dinner, Hreidmar reveals that the giant otter that they had killed was one of his sons, who was a shapeshifter, and in a rage takes Odin hostage, telling old Loki that he has until dawn to collect a massive ransom. Which he does. Also, this whole thing is very clearly, like, being orchestrated by old Loki. Because he's the one that killed the otter, and then it was like, oh, here's a good idea, let's wear its pelt for warmth. And then they go to Hreidmar's inn, and Hreidmar's like, you're wearing my son on your backs.
Yes, and then Prince Odin is just a massive idiot.
Yeah, he's just overly trusting. So then, Hreidmar and the remaining sons are very naturally like, hey, let's kill these 2 strangers that killed our brother/son. And then old Loki's like, wait, this is Prince Odin. Don't you want a ransom? And they're like, yeah, we do want a ransom.
Yee.
So then old Loki goes to find Andvari the dwarf, who guards his massive treasure hoard in the form of a giant pike. And Andvari's whole mythos is that he can protect himself from anything he can think of. So old Loki pulls out something that he can't think of, namely a rocket launcher. So as he dies, Andvari puts a death curse on the gold that whoever is, like, it's something to do with the truth. Like, they get kind of liberal with the exact wording of the curse to set up later events, but it's something to do with the truth. The initial curse is that Loki can't lie about how he killed Andvari, but he has no intentions of lying, because he shows up with the gold back at Hreidmar's inn, and they're like, how'd you get all that gold? And he says, and I quote, I shot a fish with a bazooka.
He's like, yeah, I did the thing. I understood the assignment.
Ewing is a genius. So with the ransom paid, old Loki and Odin continue on their way.
Together!
Only for a little bit. Odin says that he now owes old Loki, so Loki tells him to build a magic box with a magic lock, and that he'll come back at a later time to tell him what to put in the box. Kendra looks upset. Are you upset because Odin continued to hang out with Loki?
Yes! And just do what this man says. He's like, yeah, I'll make you a magic item. Little gremlin.
The exact wording as to why Odin, like, even gave Loki, like, a favor is because Loki
saved him. But wasn't it your fault?
Yeah, but
did you or did you not kill the otter yourself?
More so that Loki, like, came back for him when he could have very easily just left.
No.
This is a time of myths and legends where everyone's all about honor and being bound by their word and this and that.
If you get me kidnapped, I don't care if you come back for me. It's hands on sight in the parking lot.
Right. Anyways, Loki and Odin split at that point after Loki's like, build me a box. See you later. Meanwhile, the truth curse on the gold leads one of Hreidmar's son, Fafnir, to attack his family and kill his father and take off with the gold. The other surviving son, Regin, forges the sword Gram to kill Fafnir, who over time turns into a dragon, by sleeping on his massive hoard of cursed gold, which is a very typical dragon thing to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how dragons are made.
It's at this point where this just becomes like a retelling of an actual Norse myth that I'm like somewhat familiar with. It's at this point where Sigurd enters the story. Sigurd, known as Asgard's first hero, shows up at Regent's Inn, who convinces Sigurd to take up the sword Gram and slay Fafnir. He does, and claims the gold, therefore sort of passing the truth curse onto himself, and onto the sword Gram, since it was steeped in Fafnir's blood, thus setting up the truth sword Gram that new Loki now has in the present. Sigurd also drinks Fafnir's blood, which lets him talk to birds, one of which tells him that Regent intends to kill him.
Huh?
What are you confused by?
I don't understand the connection between drinking blood and talking to birds.
It's magic.
Okay. I was hoping you had a better answer.
Nope.
I assumed that.
In Norse mythology, drinking dragon blood lets you talk to birds.
Uh-huh.
That's just how it works.
Continue.
Anyways, Sigurd kills Regent with Gram, which now has his truth enchantment. And he also cooks and eats Fafnir's heart, which, through some unexplained magical means, I think sort of takes him out of the Ragnarok cycle and lets him wander the earth. So, years later, for reasons that are explained in a different comic, Sigurd flees Asgard in shame, leaving his sword Gram behind. And even more years after that, Odin's father, Bor, the current Allfather, dies, and Odin finds the sword Gram in his effects. The bird that warmed Sigurd all those years ago then shows up on the windowsill, revealing itself to be Old Loki, because of course, and he tells Odin that Gram is to be the item to be locked inside the magic box, which sets it up for new Loki to find many years later. They actually do show new Loki finding this, but it's in like, it's a short story in a longer comic that was like a one-shot to set up like an event.
Yeah, because by the time this series starts, he already has Gram, right?
Yeah. So the whole heist where he goes and finds Gram in the magic box all happens off-panel in another comic that isn't worth tracking down to read, because it was like a free comic book day thing or something like that. In the modern age, Sigurd, still wandering the earth outside of the cycle, discovers that new Loki has stolen Gram and resolves to steal it back. Actually, at this point, I think he's back in this. It's confusing because when he cooks and eats the dragon heart, it said that he becomes unmortal, which is supposedly different from immortal, which is what the Asgardians are.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, the entirety of the next issue has Sigurd trying to remove himself from the Ragnarok cycle again. So maybe at some point in the middle he had gotten put back on the cycle? Who knows?
Why? I thought Loki was hunting him because he was out of the cycle, and that's what the All-Mother wanted to collect, the people who are outside of the cycle.
Right, but also, Sigurd is very much, like, he contacts a magician to try and get himself put... Oh, no, I remember what it was.
No, he wants to contact the magician about getting himself reincarnated and not
put in Valhalla.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, that's... Actually, it's the very next issue where they talk about that. So we'll put a pin in that until it comes up. Issue 4. Do you have anything to say just as we're at the halfway point?
I love this comic so much.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I also love it very much. Issue 4. On the top of a mountain, somewhere in Tibet, Kalu, the master of dark magic, is approached by Sigurd, who at this point has stolen Gram back. We get a flashback to earlier, where Sigurd is breaking into Loki's apartment, who at the time is hanging out with Verity. Loki tells Verity what his whole long scheme plan is, but we don't hear it because
we hear like 4 words. Very cool.
Because the camera is following Sigurd, so we don't actually... He's out of earshot, so we're out of earshot. While this is happening, Verity just sees Sigurd, who's like wearing an invisibility charm. She's just like, hey, who's that Invisible Man in the
She's like,
apartment.
this is all awesome, but who's that guy?
I love Verity so much. She's like the best character in this comic. Sigurd tries to talk his way out of it, which includes like trying to hit on Verity in a very gross way.
It wasn't even trying to talk himself out of it. He just went straight to hitting on Verity.
Yeah, Sigurd sucks. Sigurd is very much Ewing taking the opportunity to like deconstruct like the idea of like, you know, the classical like pure machismo number one men hero thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like the pure testosterone kind of hero. And we're here for it. For the deconstruction, not for Sigurd himself. We then get a flashback inside of this flashback to the All-Mother instructing Loki to track down Sigurd and return him to Asgardia. Sigurd's like, well, you're not going to do that because I have the magic sword now and I'm going to be leaving. And then Loki's like, yeah, well, I have my own magic sword. And pulls out his ancestral blade, Levitain. Sure. Which apparently is Norse for damage twig.
This is my stick.
Yeah. Then a magic sword fight happens. Fight, punch, punch. They knock themselves out of the window and into a dumpster. And then Sigurd wins and takes Graham, which ends the flashback. It's at this point that Sigurd reveals to Kalu what he wants. In a previous Thor comic, Sigurd had managed to piss off the Valkyries, who are responsible for taking the dead of Asgard, those that died in like noble battle, to Valhalla, where they just chill and party and wait for Ragnarok to happen. So the lifespan of an Asgardian is if they die, they're taken to Valhalla, and then Ragnarok happens, which is like an end of the cycle, and then they're reborn after Ragnarok. So he was at some point put back into the Ragnarok cycle then, if he has
a chance of going to Valhalla.
Right, which he doesn't want to do because he pissed off the Valkyries.
Probably at the same time he got put back into the cycle.
Yeah. So this is like, imagine if you had managed to piss off like every ambulance driver in the world. This is what it's like being Sigurd. So he wants Kalu to move him from the Ragnarok cycle into the, I think, Buddhist?
Some reincarnation cycle.
A different reincarnation cycle based around the wheel of karma.
Yeah.
I am really showing my ignorance here. But to be fair, they don't really explain it very much in the comic either.
I want to say that is Buddhism.
Yeah. Right, so Kalu's like, sure, but we're going to cut ourselves with Graham to both like sign a blood pact and show that we're both being truthful. So they do, and then Kalu's like, psych, I wasn't being truthful, I'm actually Mephisto, the devil, and the carpet we've been standing on this whole time is actually a contract which you just signed in blood. There's this dumb, like, extended pun that Mephisto tells, because when he's still wearing his collar decides...
it's something about the wheel of reincarnation.
Yeah, so so apparently I just got a text from one of our dedicated listeners telling us that the wheel of karma is Hindu in nature.
Shout out to you.
Shout out to you, dedicated listener. So when Mephisto was still wearing the Kalu disguise, when he cuts himself with Graham, he says, like, I will put Sigurd on the wheel of reincarnation. And then when he reveals himself, he's like, well, I wasn't lying because, and I'm reading the quote of this, part of your torment will involve a device I invented. As it rotates, it whips you with flowers made of horse bridles. It's that kind of wheel of reincarnations. Yep. Right, so Mephisto binds Sigurd in hellish chains and is ready to drag him off to hell, except Loki was there the whole time, invisible, switched the carpet with a different carpet with a contract of it that he made, because he just has those at the ready, I guess.
There was so much about this that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll just take it. It's fine.
He also cut himself while invisible, adding his blood to the pact, the contract carpet, the car tracked.
That they were sitting/standing on. So how did you switch it out, sir? Magic.
Magic.
Moving on.
Moving on. So yeah, now they're all put into a new agreement that involves Mephisto being banished back to Hell for a little bit and Sigurd being transported to Asgardia. Right before this takes into a place, Mephisto tells Loki that he knows about the whole crime that will not be forgiven thing, which is the handy-dandy reference for
I call and
Kid Loki. Yeah.
Yes.
I call it that because anytime it's flashed back to, we see I call in the body of Kid Loki covered in blood and feathers, screaming, "I am the crime that will not be forgiven." So the contract then resolves, sending Mephisto in Hell and Sigurd to Asgardia, and he is dragged off into the dungeons, still in chains, because I guess the Allmother doesn't want to just have everyone be safe and happy in Asgardia. They
said no, screw you.
I think their goal is to like secure that Asgardia will be safe in the future, which at this point involves making sure every Asgardian is on Asgardia, even if that means binding one of them in hellish chains and putting them in the deepest pit they can imagine. Anyways,
we love motherly affection.
Talk about a helicopter mom, right? Back in Loki's apartment, later on, Loki reveals his plan, which is to break into Asgardia's dungeons, to his crew, which is comprised of Verity, Lorelei, and Thor himself.
Brotherly love.
Cliffhanger. It ends with a very cliche of Loki smirking into the camera saying, "So who's with me?" Issue 5. Heist time. I love me a heist. So I feel like at this point I should mention something that I didn't talk about at all today or in last week's episode, which is that at this point there is no Asgard. I've been calling it Asgardia. So after the siege event, which ended with Loki.
Oh no, you brought this up last week.
Did I?
Yeah.
That Asgard had been destroyed?
Yes.
Okay.
And that it was now somewhere over a Midwestern state.
Yeah. So Asgard is now Asgardia, which is a city floating over Broxton, Oklahoma. So do with that information what you will. The heist begins with Loki and Lorelei jumping off of an airplane into Asgardia. To distract Heimdall, Watchman of the Gods, they had staged a fight between Thor and a villain called the Technocracy above Earth. But it was just basically like a hollow shell of the Technocracy, just to distract Heimdall since he's such a Thor fanboy. After they get past Heimdall, Loki and Lorelei make it into the depths of Asgardia, using Verity via video call to basically tell them which traps are real and which are illusions. After they get through that gauntlet, excuse me, the last obstacle is a giant door which cannot be opened from the outside because it's immediately opened from the inside by Sigurd, who was in on it the whole time. During their earlier fight while they were inside the dumpster, Loki had convinced him to join his crew and basically revealed that he knew what was going to happen with Kalu and Mephisto and the whole thing later on. So all of this has been part of Loki's machinations the whole time.
One crafty SOB.
We love him for it, though. At this point, Lorelei and Sigurd's jobs are done. Lorelei thought that the mission was to rescue Sigurd, and Sigurd's mission was to just open the door at the right time. So Loki intends to continue delving into the dungeons, but they're basically like, peace.
I did what I came here for.
And they just dip together. They will return later on, though. Notes. Loki reveals via internal monologue that the point of this mission had been to figure out what the Allmother had been hiding and why they'd been acting so weird since the Avengers Tower mission. And it turns out what they'd been hiding had been old Loki, which new Loki finds behind a secret door. After they argue a little bit, new Loki stabs old Loki with Graham, which has no effect since old Loki isn't lying to himself about who he is because he's just that evil and crazy, I guess.
I'm not a liar, I'm just a crazy person.
and this is a very important revelation. We learn that old Loki is not like some reincarnation or another like memory backup of like the OG Loki, like Eichel had been. He's actually new Loki from the future. He is this like merged, mixed new Loki from centuries into the future, and he's traveled back into this era to make sure that his future comes about.
That seems so unnecessary. Like, imagine you're living your life and you're like, you know what? I'm going to go back in the past and make sure that I end up in this exact moment, even though you're already in that exact moment.
Maybe it's because, I mean, it could just be like the self-fulfilling thing where it's like, well, I remember when I fought my future self, so I have to go fight my past self as my future self to make sure that that happens. Like that kind of thing. Like it's already happened.
Then whose idea was it?
It's the, what's the theory? It's the, there's like
the
vase or the urn. Do you know what I'm talking about? For those of you
oh,
who don't
no,
know what I'm
that's a
talking
different
about.
one than what I'm thinking of.
So let's say, right, you are an archaeologist and you find fragments of an urn, right? And you manage to find enough to put it back together or to create a facsimile of that urn from similar materials. And then somehow that urn travels back into, say, ancient Rome, where it gets broken and buried and turned into fragments, which are then found by an archaeologist in the future. Who created the urn in the first place?
Yeah. Yep.
It's that kind of thing.
Yep.
That's at least the metaphor that I've seen like a couple times to explain this specific type of time paradox. Anyways, this is obviously like very emotionally traumatizing for new Loki, since like his whole MO is trying to make sure that he doesn't become OG Loki, and then himself from the future shows up and is basically like, nah, your whole existence is basically worthless. You should just give up.
When I tell you, I'd lay down and die immediately. I did all this work and I'm still no. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for telling me. I give up.
Right. At this point, the All-Mother shows up, and they take advantage of the fact that Graham is still sticking out of old Loki's chest to basically quiz him about the future.
Loki, who's really new Loki.
The Loki that will be. I'm just going to keep calling him old Loki because he is Loki and he is old.
Okay.
The future that he comes from is actually one that has popped up a couple of times, like in Thor comics, the Thor mythos. I think it's just referred to as King Thor. But yeah, he's like, yeah, this is what's going to happen in the future. And the All-Mother's like, cool. So that means Asgard will continue to live at least until that point. So our mission is doing as intended. And at this point, he realizes new Loki, or young Loki. I'm just going to keep calling him new Loki. New Loki realizes that he and the All-Mother have conflicting missions because his whole shtick has been trying to break himself free from the chains of destiny and from the bounds of his story, whereas the All-Mother finds security in the bounds of the story and the chains of destiny in knowing that in the future Asgard and Asgardia will be safe.
Yeah.
Right?
New Loki sitting there like, do you not see a problem with this? You're literally getting this from evil old me. Where is my justice?
And All-Mother's like, well, in his future, Asgard's safe, so we'll chill with it. So Loki quits. He just quits. He quits his job as agent of Asgard and goes home and cries.
As he should.
And that's issue 5. We're gonna speed through. Issue 6 is pretty light in terms of serious. Issue 6 is all about tie-ins. So the first things first, I completely forgot about another event that happens during this. The event's called Original Sin.
But doesn't it happen between 5 and 6?
Yes.
So this is the perfect time for it.
Yeah. The entirety of Original Sin happens between issues 5 and 6. Original Sin, the in-universe mechanics of it is that, I think, someone kills the Watcher and steals one of his eyes, and it, explodes and reveals a bunch of secrets. And by secrets, I mean retcons. One of these being that Loki and Thor had a secret sister. There was a third child of Odin. The sister was named Angela, and she had been living in a secret 10th realm Heaven, spelled Heven.
Angela is just angel with an A.
Yep. She stole the A from heaven. from the word heaven. There's a whole like real life story as to why Angela showed up when she did and the way she did. We probably won't have time to talk about it now, but Angela was initially a Spawn character from Image Comics.
Mm-hmm.
But due to legal reasons, she stopped being owned by Image and ended up being owned by Marvel. So now she's a Marvel Comics character, which I think is like maybe the first and only time that a character has just like fully jumped from one publisher's connected universe to another. I don't know about that for sure, but that's the first. So the two major things that happened to Loki during Original Sin is that he and Thor find out they have a sister, and that Loki also retrieves Odin from his exile that had been like the remains of space Asgard and returns him to Asgardia. And that's all you need to know about Original Sin.
Was Odin just chilling in the ruins of Asgard?
Basically, yeah. It was like a self-imposed exile because he's almost always a crappy king.
Don't you want to go somewhere like Florida?
Anyways, issue 6. So issue 6 is building up to the events of Axis, which I talked a little bit about last week. It's building up to something called, I think, like World War Hate is the next event. So at this point, the Red Skull had stitched parts of Professor X's brain onto his own, and he has been using his newfound telepathy to make the whole world angrier, just overall. So the effects of that are seen in this issue. We start the story in Latveria, home of Dr. Doom. Latveria at this point is in ruins due to a recent battle with the Fantastic Four. Doom is exploring the far future with his time machine when he runs into old Loki, who tells him that Loki destroyed / will destroy Latveria. So when he returns to the present, thanks to Valeria, who is the daughter of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, who at this point is just hanging out in Latveria with good old Unky Doom, Doom decides that he will destroy Loki so that future will not come about. We throughout this whole issue, we are intercut with cutaways to the citizens of Latveria who are busy rebuilding the ruins, and they're just like getting angrier and angrier at each other because of the Red Skull. Back in Manhattan, Verity storms into Loki's apartment and angrily tells him off for not telling her the whole plan involving like just how far they were supposed to break into Asgardia. There's the very nice... What?
What does it matter to her? If you wanted to break in to a secret world that I never knew about, I don't care how far you go.
I think it's because... it's because Verity thought that this was a rescue mission and not like a break-in. So
Hey.
She thought the main point of it was to rescue Sigurd and not to just break into the dungeons.
I had stuff to do.
But then there's just like a very nice character moment where Loki apologizes and tells Verity that he's like genuinely trying to change and learn how to be a good friend.
It's not on Loki. Girl, mind your own business.
Unfortunately, before he can explain, he's pulled to Latveria, but right before he teleports, Loki hands Verity something. So Loki shows up in front of Doom, who intends to destroy Loki via a magical duel, which will take the form of a conversation, because magic.
Mm-hmm.
Doom talks a lot about magic as a story, which is, something that we've been talking about a lot through the captions of the comic, and Loki himself has been talking about. And he goes into lengths about like the efforts he's made to strengthen his own story to increase the power of his magic. So like stuff like using his Doombots so that like if he ever fails at something, he can just be like, oh, it was a Doombot, it wasn't actually me. Or if a Doombot succeeds, he can be like, oh, that wasn't a Doombot, that was actually me. Et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting inspection of Doom as a character and why he does what he does. Because Al Ewing is a frickin' genius.
He's just trying to be the best Dr. Doom he could be.
Basically. As Loki and Doom talk fight, the Latvians continue to get unnaturally mad, resulting in a death, which then breaks out into a whole fight. The Loki-Doom fight ends with Doom using his time machine to freeze Loki in a cube of solidified time, therefore putting a pause to his story. And then we see that this whole time, Verity had been watching from the corner, invisible. And that's the cliffhanger for issue 6. Thoughts so far?
I liked Verity. I really did. Well, I tried to like Verity.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, wow, having to be told the truth all the time, that must suck. So I'm really rooting for you, girl. And then she got too big for her britches. She started trying to get mad where she shouldn't have gotten mad.
I will remind you that we are only like a third of the way into this series. So
and I'm already upset.
Well, there's a lot of room for character development and for relationship growth.
I don't think she's ever going to come back from, hey, you should have told me what you were doing on your magical planet or whatever. Like, mind your business.
I mean, from everything we've seen of Verity, she puts a lot of importance on because she can see through lies immediately, she puts a lot of importance on people being truthful to her.
Then she should have known that Loki was telling the lie in the first place. That's once again on her.
Because he's Loki, he figured out a way to not... He figured out a way to not tell the whole truth while also not telling a lie by just omitting the part where he's like, oh, by the way, I'm actually going... After I rescue Sigurd, I'm also going to poke around in the dungeons and break into Asgardia. So
we don't have enough time for me to get into this.
Listen, I think Verity has a point. I think, this is obviously just like, in terms of writing a story, this is just opportunity for Loki to see that he did something wrong and grow as a character. But we'll talk more about that next week. If you want to talk to us, if you have your comments on what we've read so far, if you have ideas for things for us to talk about in the future, if you have questions for us to answer, just anything, if you just want to say hey, you can tweet at us. You can get to us on Twitter at CBBCPod. That's at CBBCPOD. Or you can email us at CBBCPod, same spelling, at gmail.com. I've been your host, Matt Lasik.
I've been your co-host, Kendra Forte.
And until next time, Excelsior!